Today we're gonna learn how to make some badass bracers. Stay tuned. Greetings adventurers and welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. So as you may or may not know, we relaunched kind of this channel fairly recently. Well, maybe relaunched is kind of big, but we just changed the way we're doing things. You can learn more about it right here. Now, because we've done leather crafting so much on this channel, I really didn't want to start just back at zero. So on one hand, we are kind of starting from zero with projects like this, so that anybody who's brand new to leather crafting can totally jump in and start learning along with us. On the other side of it though, I've already reached like journeyman in leather, so I'm going to be doing projects with that in mind as well. You'll see the clear division when we do them. And since the very first project ever covered on this channel were a pair of bracers, we thought that would be a fun place to start again. Specifically this one here, if you want to laugh at how like deer in the headlights I was from the camera like 5 years ago. Man, it's been a while. Yeah, there wasn't like a good look for me then. I was like worried about the camera. I was dyeing my hair. It was a bad time. Just don't judge me. All right, with all those disclaimers out of the way, let's just jump right into this and level up this skill. This is the perfect project for getting started. All you're gonna need are like slabs of leather and some really basic tools. To start though, you're gonna need to take some measurements. Now, since the bracer fits like right here on your arm, these are the measurements we need to take. So we're gonna start at your wrist measurement, wrapping your tape around your wrist to get your measurement. Quick heads up, if you don't have any of that tailor's tape, you can totally use something like a piece of string. Just wrap it around you and hold it where that overlap happens, and then measure from the end to where you're holding. This way you can use just like a regular ruler or something to get that measurement. Okay, once you have your wrist measurement, we're gonna go ahead and take your forearm measurement at your widest point. Finally, you need to take the measurement between those 2 points. You're gonna wanna make sure you're writing those numbers down, because if you're anything like me, they're gone just the second they leave your head. All right, so now we're gonna make a template, but whenever we're doing anything that we need to be symmetrical, it helps if you take a piece of paper and actually fold that in half. From there, I use half of the wrist measurement and half of the forearm measurement, making sure they're the correct distance apart, and then I make the 2 ends of them meet. You'll see here I also used a French curve just to help me round off those edges nicely. But with that being said, you can make this as ornate as you want up at the top there. As long as that distance is correct, like for example, I made these ones that look like wings a while back. So like this measurement is the same, right? But then I just added a design here. Sometimes I like to add a little point to it or like scalloped edges or something. You can totally be as interesting with this as you want, as long as you have it so it'll cuff around you somewhere. Just add whatever you want to it. But for this one, we're gonna keep it nice and basic. So now I just go back in with an X-Acto knife and I cut out my shape. And since it was just folded piece of paper, it opens up to be perfectly symmetrical. I like that trick because then no matter how much you like mess up one of your cuts, it looks exactly the same on the other side, so it doesn't look like a mess up. It's just a nice little foolproofing of it. Now, before you commit this to leather, definitely make sure you put it on yourself to test that you like the fit, that it closes around you as much as you want it to, and that you can move your wrists and your elbow without it kind of cutting into your skin. Another thing to keep in mind, leather is thicker than paper. I know, Captain Obvious over here. The problem is when you have something that you have fitting exactly how you want it, all that extra material is gonna take up a little bit more room. So even though right now when I put that piece of paper on me, the ends are touching. Actually, wait, I think I still have my template right here. Yeah, right here. So yeah, even though the ends still touch, in fact, they overlap just a little bit, I know that when this becomes leather, there's actually probably gonna end up being a little bit of a gap there where they don't touch together. For bracers, that's not a big problem because the odds are you're gonna be wearing something underneath the bracers. So you want that little bit of extra breathing room inside of there, knowing there's probably gonna be a little bit of an opening, but at least you're still gonna be able to clamp it down nice and tight. If you have them overlapping too much, it'll never tighten down enough, and then it's just gonna kind of slide around your arm and get uncomfortable. Okay, but happy with our template here, we're gonna go ahead and commit this to the leather. To do this, I just lay it down on my leather and use an awl to trace out the edges. Now for this project, I'm using 9-ounce veg tan leather. Now, if you're watching this and you're brand new to leather crafting, check out this video here that talks about the different kinds of leather and how you'd use them. To cut this out, I just used a sharp knife and followed those marks that I made with my awl. Another tip I've said over and over again, and I will continue to say over and over again, make sure you use a fresh razor knife. dull knives are dangerous. As soon as you start to try to fight through something, that's when it slips and it gets you. You want a nice sharp knife that just easily cuts through the material. It's one of those do as I say, not as I do. I'm really lazy about that sometimes, and I do cut myself. Almost always when I'm like, I should probably replace this soon, do I slip and be like, well, I was dumb. Should have done that earlier. It's like prophecy. Cool, so with that first one cut out, I just use it as the template for the next one. One, because I want it to be exactly the same, and two, because it's a thick piece of leather rather than like a little piece of paper. It's way easier to use as a template. And bam, we have our 2 bracer blanks ready to go. That was a hard one to say, bracer blanks. I don't know why that was so difficult for me. Again, definitely try these on before you go any further to make sure you like them. There's still time to cut them and make adjustments if you don't like the way they fit. But once you've like tooled it and committed everything to like certain measurements, then it gets to be a little bit harder to do. Now the bracers I'm gonna be making today are really cool. They're these ones here that were designed by Middle Mist Red. And they're very specifically for the character that I'm going to be playing at the next LARP we're going to, Reckoning. He has this whole backstory where he had his dog and his dog ended up dying in war. So he does a lot of little things to kind of pay homage to his dog. As such, that image, it isn't a wolf, it is a dog, for he is the Hound of the Marge. So far, nobody else calls him that, but we call him that. He's the Hound of the Marge. He's in that awkward phase right now where you try to come up with a nickname for yourself and you're like, guys, can you call me the Hound of the March though? Like, you know. All his friends are gonna be like, call you what? Why would I call you the Hound? Who says that? We'll get there. I have faith in this thing. Okay, but to get this image on the leather, first thing I did was print it out. We're going to use this as a template to actually get the image onto the leather. But first, since it's paper and we're gonna be putting it onto like moistened leather, I'm afraid it's gonna get gummy and fall apart. To stop that, I like to add a little bit of plastic to the back of it. The stuff I use is just this transfer paper made by Cricut. All I do is lay it down with the sticky side up and then put my image on top of it. Finally, I just cut away any of the excess sticky stuff, leaving me with a template that is waterproof and I can reuse over and over again if I want to. Now, to accommodate my little picture here, I just went ahead and cut out some pieces of leather exactly that shape. If you've worked with leather, you know what's coming up, but if you're brand new, you're in for a bit of a treat because leather is really cool when you get it wet. Basically, once it's moistened, you can make marks in leather very easily. And that's how we're gonna get this image onto it. We're gonna start by wetting our leather. Once that leather is good and wet, I position my image over the top of it, right where I'd want it, and then I tape it into place so it doesn't move around on me. My preferred tool to get this to get on my leather is actually just a regular pen. By using the pen to trace my lines, not only do I get the indentation onto the leather, but the marks made by the pen let me see where I've been before, because honestly, I've done it with just a stylus before and I've gotten lost and I'm pretty sure I've retraced the same lines. I was like, I don't know if I got it, I'm gonna do it again. Just over and over again. Do it with a pen, it really does make a difference. You do not have to push down hard either, and as you can see, in short order, that image is placed right onto my leather. As cool as that looks, it would start to go away and fade with time. To make it stay, we want to cut in those lines. To do that, the best tool for the job is a swivel knife, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a little blade on a swivel. But by using this and retracing our lines, cutting into the leather as we do so, we're able to make those marks permanent. This will also give us the freedom to add a lot more detail, which we'll get into in a minute. First though, I also wanted to go ahead and add a border around this thing too. To do that, I'm just using this groover tool here that just coasts along the edge and cuts a little groove out at your set distance. These things aren't just great for like adding that detail, but it also adds a space for like thread to go, right? So if you're gonna stitch this, it makes it so that that thread sits a little bit deeper than the leather so it doesn't wear away over time. Speaking of adding a border, I want the big piece that's gonna be on me to have some border and detail as well. To add that in, I'm just using this wing divider here, which is basically a compass with 2 sharp feet, just to give me an inch border around the whole thing. This leaves a light mark that I'm able to follow with my swivel knife and cut into place. Then finally, I go around the entire thing with this edge beveler, which just knocks down the edge to round it off a little bit. That really goes a long way to making your project look more complete. If you leave it with kind of the sharp edges and stuff, one, they're more prone to damage, they're gonna get hit a lot and they're gonna wrinkle in those areas. But two, it just doesn't look finished. It looks like, I don't know, man. I don't know if we're just like conditioned to know that rounded over edges look more finished, but it just looks rough. All right, with that, we've used all of our knives and cutting implements and we're ready to actually start adding some cool detail to this thing. Though before we do that, I want to give you a message from our sponsor. Today's sponsor is, well, it's me, it's us, it's Maddie and I. Look at this! Merch! In case you haven't noticed here, I am wearing a Skill Tree shirt. Keep leveling up, you. We've got a bunch of different designs that Maddie's been working on with various artists. Put on all manner of merch, so definitely go check it out. We're gonna leave the link in the description below and let us know which ones of them you like. We're gonna go ahead and change up designs constantly, try to add some new fun stuff. So yeah, if there's anything in particular from this show that you really dig and you'd like to see on like something, definitely let us know because we're constantly looking for ideas. Okay, so to make this thing look awesome, it really doesn't take a lot. I'm just gonna basically use 3 other tools. Basically just an edge beveler, a pear shader, and a backgrounder for texture. So earlier we cut in all of those designs, but we want to make them stick out from the back as if they're popping out. In order to do this, we can use the beveler tool. To do that, we can use the beveler tool and a mallet, following along that edge we cut, making sure the sharper edge of that beveler tool is sitting within it, and knocking down the leather around it. So basically, instead of making something stick out, we're actually bringing the edges that touch it down, and that gives the illusion that it's sticking up. You can see the difference here. This one was beveled, and this one wasn't. The beveled one is way more defined and just kind of 3-dimensional. Now, while hammering, you don't want to hit down with the hammer. You just want to pick the hammer up and let it fall. This way, your force is consistent with the force of gravity as you kind of move along, and it stops it from getting ripply. The pear beveler, on the other hand, is really good for something that has kind of a concave shape. So I use it on things like the ear here and the nostrils, just to give it that kind of shape. Hopefully you get kind of an understanding of tooling with that. If you need more, I have an episode that's just on like the finer detail of tooling right here. All right, so with that dog bit pretty much done, I want a way to actually like tie this onto myself, right? Like bracers need little grommets and wraps here. To make that happen, I just used my hole punch and popped in 5 holes per side, evenly spaced apart. Now, because my dude in the LARP operates in shadow, one of his symbols is the moon, which Maddie added to the very edges of this image here. That said, I wanted it to be very consistent. I wanted that shape to be right. And rather than trace it, I came up with what I think is a pretty good idea. Basically, I have these half-round punches that I could use. They already have that crescent shape. All I did was position them where I'd want them to go in between those grommet holes and give them a really light tap so they only cut like halfway through the leather. Doing this leaves me with these perfect little arcs. I then go in with my swivel knife and connect those arcs together, giving myself these little moons. And I thought that was pretty good. I'm gonna give myself one of these. I gotta stretch before I do that. I wasn't ready. Just like before, we're gonna go ahead and wet this leather down and then use my bevel tool to make those little moons stick out. I'm also gonna bevel in all around my edges there to help make that border stick out as well. That's all well and good, but I did want to add some more interest. Now, earlier I showed another backgrounder tool that has kind of a smaller tooth to it, but because this is such a large project, I kind of wanted something that was a little bit more bold. So I actually busted out this background tool that's like a little gravel texture to it, but by using this and just kind of randomly pounding it all over the leather, it leaves me with this really neat gravelly texture. I liked it so much, I also added it just behind the dog too. Just a heads up, when I got that stamp, it was perfectly round, and I actually used like a belt sander to sand one side flat, just because that made it a lot easier for me to go around edges with. Just saying, if you get tools, they don't have to stay whatever you bought them. You make them whatever works best for you. Okay, happy with my tooling and my texturing, it's time to add some color to this. Now, because in the picture it is mostly dark, I'm actually gonna start with a base of black. What I'm using here is just a USMC black that I evenly spread over all of my pieces. Then once it's dry, I go back in and I buff it to a shine. You always want to buff your leather after you've dyed it, not just to get like that finish looking good, but there's always this kind of powdery like leftover dye on the surface, and if you start doing anything else after that, it gets on everything. You want to wipe that off. All right, now in the image that Maddie made, everything like the dog itself and kind of the background of that has this cool silver gray tone to it. To do this, I'm actually using this water-based dye here that comes in a silver. I like this dye a lot. It has kind of glitter in it, and the finish does a good job of kind of mimicking metal. There are some flexible paints I have that do as good, if not a better job at this, but sometimes I feel like they're a little too overbearing. With this one, I'm gonna be able to let some of that black show through. There's less of a possibility of it peeling afterwards because it's a dye rather than like a paint. And honestly, look at it. It looks really cool. It's got a nice shine to it that matches the sheen of the rest of the project. I'm really happy with this product. That background looks like hammered metal. My little moons stick out. I'm super happy with it. But it is still too flat, meaning everything's like too perfect of a color, right? Everything on the dog is the same color, so nothing really sticks out. And also there's too much of a contrast. Those were different pieces of leather that I used, and they took the dye differently. So even though one of them is a black, it's kind of a warm black. Some of that leather tones comes through. So the dog, in comparison to like the rest of that black, it almost looks, I don't know, they look clashing. And one looks really cold and one looks really warm. Doesn't matter though, because we're gonna make it all look uniform. First though, we need to seal what we've done so far. To do that, I'm just using some of this resist here. All you gotta do is apply it all over your leather with a moist sponge. Then you can let it dry or speed it up with a hairdryer and let it set until it's clear and no longer tacky. Once we're there, I went over the entire thing with a dark brown antiquing gel. Once it's completely covered, I immediately go back in and wipe away all of the stuff on the surface. So basically what's happening here is all that dye is getting into all the little nooks and crannies. By wiping off everything that's on the surface of it, all that's gonna be left over is the stuff that is sunk in. That's gonna make a lot of shadow. It's gonna bring out a whole bunch of detail. Not only that though, but it also does impart a little bit of color to everything, making everything a more uniform tone. This really helps bring a whole project together and look like it belongs together, all those different colors. All right, we're on the home stretch here. First, we need to finish up those edges. To do that, I'm just using some of this burnishing solution here, which I apply to the edges with a tool, though you can just use a paintbrush if you don't have one of these. And then I go back in with a slicker tool, which lays down those edges and makes everything nice and smooth. This adds a lot to a finished look. Now, I learned something. It's great how much you can learn even on a really basic project. I learned something new. So my last time at Tandy's, I saw that they sell these, it's like a piece of glass, almost looks like a bone folder, but a piece of glass. Best way I can think of it. But it's a burnishing tool, and it's made for burnishing like the back side of your leather. So these are some older bracers that I made. Actually, I made them just after making that first project that I showed you. These ones are mine. I've used them for like every LARP I've ever been to. Anyways, on all of the projects that I've made, the flesh side, which is the rough side of your leather, has always just been left rough. Turns out that burnishing tool is to burnish that down to make it nice and smooth. I didn't want to spend the money on a unitasker tool like that, so I decided to improvise with this little bowl thing here. It's glass, it has rounded edges. Same thing, exactly the same thing. All I did was put all of my compound all over the back side of the leather, and then use the edges of that bowl to burnish the whole thing. And it worked friggin' great! Look at the difference between one that hasn't been done and one that has. Super slick, it cost me nothing extra. I had it laying around, it's perfect. Now, for those grommet holes where the lacing is gonna go through, you don't wanna leave them just like they are because they're gonna stretch over time. You wanna add some metal grommets to it. These things are super simple. They just kind of fit into the spaces that you punched out with your holes. To set them, there's an anvil and a little striker that goes along with it. Basically, the head of the grommet sits inside of that anvil, and the striker goes on the opposite side to lock it into place. So as you can see here, I just kind of put it into the anvil, knock it a couple times with my hammer, and then move on to the next one. Doing this, you're able to get a really fast flow and lock these in really quickly. All right, the last thing I need to do is to actually take my little image and lock it on to where it goes on the bracer. Bunch of ways you can do this, but the image specifically shows little laces, so I wanted to sew it into place. To get it to stay put while I do, I just added some Tanner's Bond tape, which is a double-sided tape used for things like leather, and added it to the back of where the dog is. Then I carefully positioned it where it would go onto the bracer. Once that was in place, it was off to the sewing machine to lock it in. Now, I know this is a basic tutorial, and I know most of you will not have a sewing machine. Not gonna lie to you, I was running real low on time. I just didn't have the time to sew it. But if you did want to sew this on and you want to do it by hand, because you don't have a fancy sewing machine, which, you know, most people won't, it's super easy to do. You want to use a saddle stitch, and to make your holes, they're these little forked punches. You can check out this episode here where I go over all these different stitches. Just go to the saddle stitch. All you do is you follow your line that you made earlier with your punches, knock your holes, and then stitch it together by hand. On my side, once those were locked into place, all I had to do was add in my lacing, and bam! Check those bad boys out! Look at how slick these are! I love them so much. I am jazzed to wear these at the next LARP I go to. I don't have them tightened down right now, I just kind of slid them on. But the dog is like super subtle, but it still looks metallic. All this part here looks like it's kind of hammered metal. Oh, I love them, and they're comfortable. I can move around. I've made the problem before where I've made them like too long, so they're either like digging into here when I'm trying to swing, or they're like digging into right here. These ones are nice. Though, if you want to make yours more comfortable, which I might do with these ones, I found if you wet it a little bit and then you curl up the edges of them, it actually gives you a nice little cushion. But I am super happy with these. It is a simple project, and honestly, you can make some pretty amazing stuff. Just put whatever image you like onto the leather, which is pretty simple, and then just use your basic starter kit. In fact, I'll link one in the description below that I'd recommend from Amazon. It's not like super incredible quality, but it'll definitely last you a few years at least to get started. But it'll have more than everything you need, way more tools than I used for this project. All right, now I hope you liked this project. If you did, why don't you give me some of that like it love, and don't forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. Also, let me know if you've been watching this show for a while. Let me know if you like us kind of jumping back like this. We really do want people who are new to the show to be able to like start learning from the beginning without having to go all the way back. And this is just gonna help us have a more organized curriculum. Also, do make sure you check out our merch. I wanna know what you think about it. Leave that in the comment section too if you go and check it out. I'd like to know your thoughts. Now, none of this would be possible without the support from all of you, our subscribers, people who watch this and share it. And nowhere is there a bigger community of those people than at our Discord. Not only do they help support this channel, but look at the incredible projects that they leave there. It is an amazing community of crafters that come together to show off what they're doing, help each other out, and generally just kind of have a good time together. It is one of the things I am most proud of with this channel, and I really love the community that's been built there. If you haven't joined the Discord yet, definitely check it out. The link is in the description below. Leave whatever project you're working on, and eventually you might see it here. All right, I think that's all I got. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time, and in the meantime, keep leveling up, you. You made it to our end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that. It's a fantastic way to support this channel. Another great way to support this channel is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are our Patreon members, and we couldn't do any of this without them. Seriously, they make it so that we can buy our materials, keep this ship running, and continue to grow. Special shout out to our newest high tier Patreon level member, Elise Q. Elise Q, thank you so much for your support. It genuinely means just everything to us. One step closer to the dream. The dream is doing this full time, just so you know, the dream. If you like what we do here and like to support us, consider joining our Patreon, link in the description below. Otherwise, you can check out one of these videos that YouTube thinks you'd like, and that would be awesome too. Now, if you don't mind, I have more merch to wear. I love our merch.